I'm a big believer that nothing is good or bad. I don't believe that there are things that are inherently good or inherently bad. I think that it all just depends on what it is, how you use it, what you make of things. I think that obviously there are things that lead in one direction, that goes without saying, but I think that things are almost always going to be up to the user. And I think that friends, I guess more accurately people, but I feel like it sounds weird to say the way that you use people. I guess companionship would more be the word I'm looking for, are one of these things that nobody ever talks about. The fact that people can use friends as a coping mechanism. I have found myself many times in my life using friends, not using them in the negative connotation. They're not as if I'm using people, but using them almost to cope with something within myself. I think when people are especially uncertain about themselves, it's not uncommon that they'll search for themselves in other people. And perhaps it's a bit exaggeratory to say I think this is one of the most dangerous things. I mean, there's worse ways to cope with not knowing who you are than making a bunch of friends. But I think it's a slippery slope to go down for sure. I think so often, and this doesn't just go for friends, this can go for romantic relationships too. People use them as a way to almost find themselves. You know what I mean? Like, in the same way that when you were in middle school and you wanted to be cool, you throw on, whatever's cool in middle school these days. For me, I know it was like a Supreme hoodie and Vans you'd throw on almost. And it was like, okay, this is like the cool thing right now. This is like I feel good, I'm being cool, but then you gotta kind of face the music one day of like, wow, this really isn't me. I'm wearing a costume right now. I think people use friends the exact same way, I really do. I think that people oftentimes end up using friends as a costume. Of almost like, no, this is who I am. I'm gonna use a really cartoonish example here to try and get the point across a little bit. Let's say that you are kind of insecure, you don't really know who you are. Specifically, this happened to me when I'm younger, kind of thing. So you start hanging out with like the skaters, and you almost attach your identity to that. This is super cartoonish, but I feel like in every cartoon there is that episode where the characters, or one of the characters, will kind of like start hanging out with the skaters, the football kids, and they start dressing a certain way and using certain slang, and then at the end of the episode, all their real friends come to them, and they're like, come on, Jerry, this ain't you. You're one of us. You're one of the nerds, or something like that. I think that a more realistic way that ends up happening is not when people have a bunch of friends and they want to be cool, even though, when you're 13 that happens. But I think in life, that almost happens like forever. I mean, I've seen grown-ass people do this, where they start hanging out with other people, and it's not because they want to be cool or because they're insecure in their friends or anything like that. It's because they're insecure in themselves, They want to try out this new costume to see, this is me. I think this is, I don't know if I can say this for sure, but I sometimes I see people following trends, and I'm like, sometimes I wonder, do people do this because it's more comfortable, maybe not more comfortable, but I guess it's just the path of least resistance to look for yourself in a trend and be able to be like, look, I'm cool right now, than it is to genuinely put the time in and find who you are. I do think that happens sometimes. Obviously, I can't say what percentage of people following trends are doing this, but I think people use it that way. But I think more than anything, people use other people that way. I really do. I think that it's also not nearly as cartoonish in that episode as when you were a kid, or nearly as cartoonish as it is in that episode from when you were a kid. You get what I mean. I don't think it really happens like that. I think it's a lot more subtle. You know what I mean? Maybe you hang out with a bunch of people who are like, who either talk a certain way, sometimes it can be a certain hobby, but you just kind of take on their personality and you're like, this is my identity now. I know I did that so much when I was younger because I was insecure in like who I was. And it was like, everybody seems to like these guys. So if I also like these guys and hang out with these guys and start acting a little bit like them, maybe I could be like them. The inverse of this, though, that's so interesting is like, oftentimes that's also how you find out who you are. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's almost like you got to do this balancing act of trying on different forms to be like, this is who I am, whilst also going like, I need to distance myself the second I know this isn't me. You know what I mean? Like, I think a whole lot of people get caught up in doing the right thing, of hanging out with different people, trying out those different faces on, if you will, to figure out what they are, who they want to be. But then I think that a lot of the times, people don't ever actually distance themselves because it's easier to be like, you know, I'll just be this. I'll just be this person. Have you guys ever met people who like every month they have a new group of friends or they're talking to a new person or something like that? And it's like, sometimes you look at that and it's like, it almost feels like they're running from themselves, you know? And I don't know, I think this is tough because I don't know what the inverse of that looks like, because I'm so far from ever relating to that. For me, it's always been, you know, I go with those different groups, or I kind of, maybe, I don't know, I guess it's a bit cocky to say I know who I am now. I have a better understanding of it for sure, though, than I once did. But people, I think, or like, I would go with those different groups and then I would, once I kind of knew who I was though, or like knew that I wasn't that, I would pull away really hard because it was like, this is, like, I get it. Okay, cool, that's not me. On to the next. Like, I feel like I did that throughout my entire adolescence. So I can't understand the feeling of being like, I hate this person I'm next to, you know, or I'm going to my other friends, I'm complaining about these people, but I keep them here because maybe it's a fear of loneliness. I don't know, because I feel like people hop from person to person, not because they're lonely, but because they're scared of who they really are. But I also don't know what that means because I'm so far from relating to that, you know? Identity is such an interesting thing because it feels like it's natural. Like, it feels like it's something that we made, or it feels like it's something that, like, comes to you as a human. You know what I mean? Like, you need an identity, of course. But I also feel like it's like, at the same time, I think it's so tough because it is a social construct. You know what I mean? Or oftentimes your identity is going to be based off of social constructs. So, you know, like, if I ask you your identity, I'll use me as an example, right? Like, if you ask me who I am, I'd say an artist. I'd probably go with that. Or like, I'm a guy who likes to make things. Something like that, maybe. Painter, maybe I'd go for, because that's an easy one. I'd say I like reading. You know, I'd throw in a lot of these things, and none of them are natural. You know what I mean? Like, none of it, they're all things that we made up, but they're also like, how else do you do this? You know what I mean? Like, you gotta kind of, somebody had to come up with the idea of a painter, and I probably don't 100% identify with that idea despite saying I am that. And I think that's almost like it feels like a paradox of trying to find your authentic identity takes you being deeply inauthentic in every direction until you find where you land. And also at the same time, will never 100% be you. Unless you kind of, I guess, make your own landing spot. Is that the goal of life? To be unique enough by the end of it? Is that what self-actualization looks like? I don't know. I was just thinking about this, and identity is such an interesting thing, because you gotta find it in other people. But it's so personal. This is the painting. I am experimenting with a style of something deconstructed, a little bit unfinished. This is scary. I wanted to kind of, so this is, wouldn't call it good. It's interesting though. And I wanted to do it because I wanted to be very free form, which is why I have half it blurred out, because I feel like this is how identity feels to me. And I think it's somewhat successful in capturing what I want it to be. It just doesn't 100% like look nice. Because I like how over here it almost looks like a skin tone. Like there's like a very supple tone under it, but the red is so visceral on top, and it's so messy, and half of it's still uncovered. I think I went too violent on it though, too like gross. But yeah, this is the painting. Today's a shorter paint and talk. I don't know. I think that's all I have to say about this topic though, and the painting's done. So go check this out on the Instagram. Let me know what you thought of today's discussion. And until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Seiss. This has been Paint Talk episode 132. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all.